Christopher Tompkins was last seen January of 2002 walking away from a survey job in a wooded area of Highway 85 in Ellerslie. Deputies continue to ask for tips in this case as they remain vigilant about learning what happened to Tompkins. If you have any information on this missing persons case, you're asked to call the Harris County Sheriff's Office or the GBI.
In this episode, we'll discuss the bizarre disappearance of Christopher Tompkins. Let's begin. On the morning of January 25th, 2002, 20-year-old Christopher Thompson left for his job as a surveyor. Christopher met up with the 3 members of his 4-man surveyor team and went about their daily routine of survey work at an expansive lightly wooded area off County Line Road near Highway 85 in Ellerslie, Georgia. The team moved as a unit, each man spaced 50 feet apart in a line as they worked their way in the same direction through the forest. Christopher, who was the last in the line, was keeping regular communications with the others, and he and the man in front of him were within eyesight of each other. At one point, the surveyor in front glanced back toward Christopher, who had just been talking to him moments before, to find he had vanished. It didn't make any sense because he had just been there several seconds before, but now there was nothing, and nowhere he could have gone without being seen. The surveyor called the others and they searched the area, but what they discovered only made it even stranger. Nearby was one of Christopher's work boots hanging from a barbed wire fence, with no sign of the other boot. In a patch of grass next to the boot were his work tools, blue fabric from his work pants, and 12 cents. That was it, and it seemed as if Christopher had simply vanished out of existence. At 1 p.m., around 4 hours after Christopher disappeared, one of the other surveyors finally called their boss to say that Christopher had vanished. Christopher's mother was not told about the incident until 4:15 p.m. When a missing persons report was filed the next day, authorities were not able to find any additional clues as to what had happened to him. A more intensive search was launched, but nothing turned up until months later when the missing work boot was bizarrely found by chance on the private property of a man who lived 900 yards from where Christopher had gone missing. How did Christopher just go missing in practically the blink of an eye in full view, only to leave behind just one boot? Where could he have gotten to so fast, and why were there no other signs of him anywhere? The disappearance has long remained baffling, and as with many cases of people who have vanished into thin air, theories as to what happened to him have varied from the mundane to the truly bizarre. One of the first theories was that there had been some sort of foul play involved. After all, the surveyors with him did not report the disappearance for several hours, more than enough time for them to dispose of the body, allowing them to make up whatever story they liked. However, there was no motive at all for this, no evidence of foul play, and none of the other surveyors were ever seriously interrogated or investigated on the matter. There was also the theory that Christopher had simply walked off the job and run off to start a new life, a theory supported by his boss's claim that Christopher had been acting strangely in the days leading up to the vanishing. But his own mother adamantly denied this, saying, "Chris lived with me and I saw him every day. There was neither strange behavior on his part nor any distress." Many of his friends and family would insist that Christopher had been a well-adjusted, happy individual, and his co-workers painted a picture of a respectable, hard-working individual. There's also the question of, if he did walk away, then how did he manage to do it in full view of the others, and why did he do it minus one boot, and while leaving behind those other bizarre clues? Another theory was he might have been attacked by a wild animal, but if that were the case, wouldn't there be more evidence of a struggle or injury? And how could this possibly happen within moments and within eyesight of the other surveyor without him knowing? It just doesn't make any sense.
It was a 20-year-old young man who left home one morning to go to work. He was a part of a 4-man survey crew that was working in the Harris County area. They were working in wooded areas out there. And 3 people came home and 1 did not. Chris simply vanished. And when I say vanished, I need y'all to listen to me. Chris simply vanished. Sometime that afternoon, the 3 individuals who were with Chris placed a call to 911 to say he vanished. Search dogs and Sheriff Jolly and the Harris County Sheriff's Department, they brought out whatever resources they had. We found one of Chris's boots out there? Yeah. Remember now, we found one of his boots that very day. We found some of his work tools and some change that they speculated or we think may have been from Chris's pocket. But maybe a week or 2 later, the Harris County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Johnson told us that they believed Chris had just walked away. Say if a man gonna walk away, he wouldn't take off his boot to do so. He probably want to keep both of them on if he was gonna be walking.
Now, this is where we get into some of the more far-out theories that have made the rounds. One idea is that Christopher had seen something out there that he was not supposed to and was silenced by some mysterious party, with the authorities in on it all, explaining the lag time in informing the family. Even weirder still is the theory that some mysterious and very powerful force had actually picked him up and carried him off, with his belongings snagged on the fence as he was carried away. Ghosts? UFO? Bigfoot? Who knows? There are even the theories that the culprit could have been some sort of vortex, a rift between dimensions, or even the doings of ancient Native American spirits or curses from the days when the native Creek people were massacred and driven from these lands by encroaching settlers. Of course, there is no evidence whatsoever for any of these wild theories either, and they serve merely to add a layer of additional bizarreness to an already bizarre case. So, what happened to Christopher Tompkins? It remains a complete mystery.
A family in turmoil over the disappearance of 33-year-old Ermelinda Alvarado, a Merced mother of 8 children, ages 6 to 23, a mother, sister, and wife who just vanished.
Hello, friends, and welcome to our second episode of Land of the Lost. Today, we'll be discussing the disappearance of Ermelinda Alvarado. Please make sure you share the links in the description box and share this video so we can help Ermelinda's family spread awareness. Let's begin. Ermelinda Alvarado was last seen in Merced, California on April 10, 2019. She had rented a red Hyundai Elantra while her husband was on a business trip to Texas. At 2:25 a.m., she called her sister and said she was driving to Florida to visit their brother. A few minutes later, she called her husband and said she wanted to drive to Texas to be with him. He told her to go back home and pick him up at the airport when he arrived home. At 9:37 a.m., she posted a video on one of her social media accounts. It showed her alone in the desert near Blythe, California. Her sister kept trying to call her, and later that morning, Ermelinda finally answered. She said she'd been in a car accident and 2 men had tried to take her car and keys, and she had to run for her life. Almost 3 hours later, she answered a call from her brother-in-law and said a friend had picked her up and they were en route to Los Angeles, California. This is the last time anyone spoke to her. Ermelinda never arrived to pick up her husband Jose from the Fresno Yosemite International Airport. She's never been heard from again. On April 11, 2019, the rented Hyundai was found abandoned off eastbound Interstate 10 in a remote desert area between the towns of Blythe and Indio, California, near the Arizona border. Ermelinda's purse, identification, cash, and credit cards were inside it, but her cell phone was missing. Ermelinda's family have taken several trips to the desert and Riverside County where the vehicle was discovered. They have passed out flyers and searched for anything that would help find her. After working with a volunteer private investigation service, police found a location where her phone pinged a nearby tower. The family then used Google Maps to pinpoint an area to search. Jose says, "We searched it. It was hot, it was hard, but we did whatever we could." After a 3-mile hike in the desert and a mile to the top of a mountain, the family discovered her shoes, but no other sign of her.
April 11th, around 2 a.m. is when I called, reported her missing, and we haven't had contact with her since.
Ermelinda's husband says he doesn't know what to think. While her husband was on a work trip in Texas, according to Merced police, Alvarado rented a car. It was found days later, abandoned on eastbound Highway 10 near the California-Arizona border.
30 miles from Blythe, her purse was in the car.
The purse was in the car.
ID, credit cards, cash.
Since her disappearance, Jose and Ermelinda's sisters, Maria and Suzanne, have taken trips to the secluded desert area of Riverside County, where the rented vehicle was discovered, passing out flyers and searching for anything that could help find her. After working with a volunteer private investigation service,
What do you think is the military base?
police found a location where her cell phone pinged a nearby tower. The family used Google Maps to pinpoint an area to search.
We searched it. I mean, it was hot, but it's hard. But we did whatever we could.
Then a break. After one hike, about 3 miles in and about a mile to the top of a mountain, they discovered her shoes.
It was very difficult terrain, rocky, honestly life-threatening. I think it was very, very difficult to get up to her shoes. It's right next to the border. It's very terrifying to just think of any and every scenario that could have happened.
Riverside County Sheriff deputies tell CBS 47 they searched the area but came up empty. Since her disappearance, her sisters have learned Ermelinda struggled with an addiction to pain medication.
I know that Vicodin came into play. After she disappeared, I kind of started looking at my mom's medications. They were missing.
Just weeks before she went missing, the family placed her on a 72-hour hold inside a rehab center. Here's what we know right now. On April 8th at 7:30 in the morning, Ermelinda dropped off her husband for a business trip at the Fresno airport. On April 9th, around noon, home video cameras show her leaving her house carrying only a brown paper bag under her arm. Saw her in Merced. Sometime afterward, she turned off the location tracker on her phone. On April 10th at 2:25 in the morning, she called her sister Maria. She said she was driving to her brother. Minutes later, she called her husband and said she wanted to drive to Texas to be with him. At 9:37 that morning, this video taken by Ermelinda was posted on her Snapchat account. It shows her alone in the desert near Blythe, California. At 10:28 a.m., she finally answered a call from her sister.
She told me that she was in a fender bender and that 2 gentlemen tried to take her keys away and that she had to run for her life.
Almost 3 hours later, she answered a call from her brother-in-law. She told him a friend picked her up and she was on her way to Los Angeles. That's the last time anyone heard from her.
Can't lose the faith, even though I'm at the point where it's hard.
I need to find her. We need to find her.
The family stated that Ermelinda struggled with an addiction to pain medication. Just weeks before she went missing, the family placed her on a 72-hour hold inside a rehab center. Ermelinda and Jose have 8 children between the ages of 6 and 23. 5 of them are their biological children, and they adopted the other 3. It's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning or not be in touch with her family by phone, text, or social media. Her case remains unsolved. Ermelinda Alvarado is 5 foot 4 inches tall, about 100 pounds, and has shoulder-length dark hair. She has braces and was last seen wearing a black hoodie, black pants, and running shoes. A message from Jose Alvarado. My name is Jose Alvarado III. I'm the husband of missing Ermelinda Alvarado. I've set up a Facebook account for the Ermelinda Alvarado case. I've also set up a GoFundMe account to not only raise funds while I'm out of work and home with the children, but any needs financially that may arise along the way dealing with Ermelinda's missing persons case. I would appreciate all the help and support I can get. As you can imagine, no family can ever be prepared for this type of situation to arise, and I'm still taking each day at a time, as this experience is one that I would never wish upon any one of you out there ever. Any prayers you can send would be very encouraging and thoughtful. shares to this GoFundMe, and any shares to the missing flyers that we have created by professional. Our entire family is going through a very public and very painful situation, and all of us want to get answers about Ermelinda Alvarado's well-being or location. Thank you again so very much from the bottom of my heart for all the help this entire time. This has not been the easiest process while keeping up with 5 active children, but I promise to do my best and check back often for any and all updates on this account and share as many updates as possible each day or week. If you travel to or from the Coachella Festival between April 9th and April 11th, 2019, please check any pictures, videos, and dashcam media you have. We would like you to check the media to see if you may have caught Ermelinda traveling. Again, the rental vehicle was a newer red Hyundai Elantra. Thank you everyone for your love and support. Sincerely, Jose Angel Alvarado III.
Dozens met on Ohio State's campus for the Brian Schaefer March for the Missing, named in honor of Schaefer, an Ohio State medical student who disappeared during a night out with friends 12 years ago. Lori Davis is a friend of the family.
Unfortunately, there have not been leads that have led to anything in Brian's case. I think that people might be afraid to talk, and I think that after 12 years they need to buck up and they need to start speaking.
Hello friends, welcome to the 3rd episode of our Land of the Lost series. In this video, we'll be discussing the disappearance of Brian Schaefer. Please make sure you share the links in the description box and share this video so we can help Brian's family spread awareness. Let's begin. March 31st, 2006 started off just as hoped for 27-year-old Brian Randall Schaefer. Spring break had officially begun and finals had concluded. As a second-year medical student at The Ohio State University, he was ready to unwind. Aside from the normal pressure of medical school, Brian's stress was overwhelming compared to most. He had suffered great loss in the weeks preceding that night. His mother, Renee, was a nurse who both encouraged and inspired her oldest son to pursue medicine. She was not able to see him fulfill this goal, however, as she was taken by myelodysplasia on March 6, 2006. She was only 51 years old. Brian was broken. So broken, in fact, that he was unable to bring himself to attend her funeral in a timely manner. One of Renee's final wishes was for her son to complete his degree. She also hoped he would get married and start a family. She was eager for her son to find happiness, and she hoped that he would propose to his girlfriend, Alexis Wagner. In perhaps an effort to nudge him in that direction, her Christmas gift to Brian and Alexis included a trip for 2 to Miami. He and Alexis were to leave on Monday, April 3rd for a week-long trip. They were never to live that experience, however. On Friday, March 31st, Brian officially started his break by having dinner at the Outback Steakhouse in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, with his father, Randy. Brian's friends wanted him to join them for drinks earlier in the evening, but Brian insisted he spend some time with his father. They were both in the midst of grief over losing the matriarch of the family. Brian's father reported that he seemed mainly concerned about his father's well-being. Brian was a bit tired, but otherwise well. Such fatigue would be unsurprising, of course, given everything he had endured that month. He needed respite. He deserved a night to forget all his troubles. After dinner with his father, Brian returned to his apartment to prepare for a night of revelry. Around 9 p.m., he joined his friend, Clint Florence, with the intention of bar hopping. They met up at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar that has since been closed. The Ugly Tuna was within a few blocks of Brian's apartment, so it made sense to begin the evening there. Within the hour, Brian took a moment to speak on the phone to his girlfriend, Alexis. She had driven up to Toledo for the weekend. She wished to spend a few days with her parents before she and Brian jetted off to Miami together. Friends and family had suggested to the couple that perhaps Miami would be the perfect location for a proposal. Alexis, certain that Brian was the love of her life, was eager to take such a trip with him. Their call was brief, and he made sure to emphasize his love for her before saying goodbye. Unfortunately, this was the last time that Alexis heard Brian's voice. Brian and Clint decided to continue their evening by moving on to several other bars before they met up with a young woman named Meredith Reed. She was a friend of Clint's and, given their condition, offered to give them a ride. They accepted, and together the three of them returned to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. Brian and his friends arrived at the bar around 1:15 a.m. on Saturday, April 1st. Surveillance cameras timestamped the trio's arrival as they ascended the escalator to the second-story bar. 40 minutes later, Brian was seen again on surveillance, standing near the top of the escalator, speaking with two young women. After a few moments, Brian says goodbye and appears to re-enter the Ugly Tuna. He is never seen on camera again. Clint and Meredith left around 2 a.m., unable to find Brian in person or able to get him to answer his cell phone. Sunday evening, a few hours prior to their scheduled flight to Miami, Alexis was more than concerned. She had not been able to contact her boyfriend over the weekend, and she knew something was wrong. Out of an abundance of caution, she contacted Brian's father and brother to let them know of her worries. They met her that evening at Brian's apartment. He was nowhere to be found, so they began searching the immediate area. By the time the police were informed of the situation, nearly 2 days had passed. Surveillance footage was reviewed from the Ugly Tuna as well as other local areas that were on his route that evening. After his last appearance at 1:55 a.m., he is never seen again on camera. All possible exits from the bar were covered by cameras, so it is unknown how he left without being caught on video. There was only one exit out of the building that was not actively being monitored, but it was on the first floor. It was also a service exit that led directly to a construction site. According to Sergeant John Hurst, who was the lead supervisor of the Missing Persons Department at the time, leaving through the service exit would have been extremely difficult. He said that there would be no reason for anyone to want to leave that way. It would have been a difficult task, even sober, and Brian had been drinking heavily that evening. When it became clear that something was truly amiss, word of Brian's disappearance spread rapidly. His picture and description were widely circulated across the OSU campus and the surrounding areas, as well as on various social media platforms. Brian is athletic in appearance. He's a Caucasian male, standing 6 foot 2 inches and weighing between 160 and 170 pounds. He has brown hair and hazel eyes. His left iris has a distinctive black dot on it. He has a tattoo on his upper right bicep. It is of the Stickman logo that was on the cover art of Pearl Jam's single Alive. He was last seen wearing an olive-colored short-sleeved shirt with a white long-sleeved shirt underneath. He was wearing blue jeans, a yellow cancer awareness bracelet, and Adidas tennis shoes. Brian had a dream of someday becoming a rock star, as evidenced by his Stickman tattoo. Brian greatly admired the band Pearl Jam. When Brian vanished, news spread quickly across the band's fan message boards, with a thread being created titled, "Columbus Area Pearl Jam Fan Gone Missing." The community rallied around the family, as did the band themselves, with Pearl Jam frontman Eddie Vedder speaking multiple times about Brian's disappearance. On June 24, 2006, during a concert in Cincinnati, Eddie took a moment to ask for any information about Brian, declaring that Brian is one of us and we miss him here tonight. Hopefully we can have a happy ending to this. Eddie then stated, "We're going to play this one for Brian," before heading into Wish List, altering the lyrics in places, begging Brian to come on home. There is love waiting at home. Brian's story has not been forgotten by the band over the years. In 2010, Eddie reminded the crowd in Columbus about Brian's disappearance before dedicating the song "Come Back" to Brian. Since his disappearance, there have been glimmers of hope, albeit just a few and only briefly. For example, Brian's apartment was broken into a few weeks after his disappearance. This could have been a major step forward in the case, but police determined it was simply a random crime and nothing more. A few months later, Alexis called Brian's phone just as she had done every night since she last heard his voice. Day after day of only getting his voicemail, in September his phone finally rang. No one answered, but they were able to ping the phone's location to Hilliard, Ohio. This, according to the cell phone company, was nothing more than a glitch. Brian's phone was never turned on again, and his credit cards were never used. Theories have abounded as to what happened to Brian that night. Perhaps he was too overwhelmed with the state of his life and simply left. Maybe he was attacked on his walk home. He was inebriated after all, and that location of town was known for its crime. Maybe his body is still within the building somewhere, or maybe it was in the construction area, later covered with concrete. Some have suggested that Clint knows exactly what happened, as he refused to undergo a polygraph test. And, according to Brian's younger brother, Derek, the two didn't always get along. Clint has stated he told the police all he knew. Therefore, he claimed, there was no need to undergo any sort of lie detector test. Police have not been able to rule out much of anything with such a lack of evidence in this case. Brian's father, Randy, and his girlfriend, Alexis, did everything they could to keep Brian's name and image in the media. Randy exhausted all means of searching, including scouring the Olatangi River at the suggestion of a psychic. Randy dedicated the remainder of his life to finding his son and helping other families who were missing loved ones. Randy, unfortunately, died when struck by a falling limb during a storm in 2008. He never found any successful leads on the whereabouts of his eldest son. The sole remaining immediate family member of Brian's is his younger brother, Derek. Alexis has begun a new life. Clint Florence has moved out of state. Lori Davis, a friend of the families who took up particular interest in Brian's case, has dedicated countless hours of her life to finding not only Brian, but also every other missing person in Ohio. Life moves on, but Brian, of course, will never be forgotten. Unfortunately, despite tips still being sent in fairly regularly throughout the years, we are no closer to answering the question, what happened to Brian Schaefer?
He is such a good dad, and it's just really frustrating when I'm trying my hardest to just stay strong for my son.
This little boy's father, Brittany Davis's husband, Tyler, hasn't been seen or heard from since February 24th, Brittany's birthday. They had planned a birthday celebration at the Easton Town Center in Columbus.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this hotel is so nice. It's huge. Look at this whole area. There's a Tiffany's over there.
Brittany says they checked into the Hilton around 5 p.m. on the 23rd. A college friend who lives nearby met them. They walked around.
We had a couple drinks at a few local bars. We were laughing. We were having a great time.
Then they took a 15-minute Uber ride to the Dollhouse Gentlemen's Club for a few more cocktails. Brittany says Tyler was exhausted and fell asleep during the Uber ride back to the hotel. They returned at 3:18 in the morning.
And when he got out of the Uber, he just seemed really confused, like he didn't exactly know where we weren't in the place we were supposed to be in his eyes. So he just took off walking, and our friend was like, no, Brittany, don't worry about it. I'll go get him. And I was like, okay.
Brittany says somehow their friend and Tyler separated, and Tyler never came back. She says he called her at 3:37.
He's like, I'm sorry, I'm just taking a walk around the block.
26 minutes later, another call.
But when I had talked to him around 4:03, he said, I'm walking through the woods. I see the Hilton. I'll be there in 5 minutes.
A third call came in minutes later. Brittany says she heard dead air for 4 seconds, then lost the call.
It just makes no sense.
2 months later, Brittany says she's still searching for answers.
I'm not giving up. I'm not ever going to stop.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode in our Land of the Lost series. Today, we'll be discussing the disappearance of one Tyler J. Davis. We ask that you please share the links in the description box and share this video with your family and friends on social media so we can help raise awareness of Tyler's disappearance and help find answers for his family and friends. We also ask that you use courtesy and respect for others in the comments section while discussing this case. Let's begin. By February of 2019, Brittany and Tyler Davis had recently celebrated their first year of marriage. Proud parents of a 1-year-old boy, the couple did not go out much. In fact, they remained close to their Wilmington, Ohio home more often than not. They reserved any solo adventures for anniversaries and birthdays. The weekend of February 23rd, however, happened to be one of those rare occasions. Brittany was turning 23, and the young parents wanted an adults-only weekend away to celebrate the occasion. The early morning hours of the 23rd began not too differently than normal. Tyler, a 29-year-old local business manager, came home from work around 3 a.m. after working his 6th 10 to 12-hour shift for the week. When he arrived home, Brittany was still awake. A bartender by trade, she was not unaccustomed to being awake at such an hour. This morning, however, she was packing everything they and their son would need for their weekend getaway. After finishing the packing and spending a bit of time together, the couple went to bed around 5 a.m. Within a few hours, their weekend of celebration would officially begin. Brittany and Tyler planned to meet up with his parents at the Texas Roadhouse on Stringtown Road in Columbus at noon. Understandably, they overslept. They eventually arrived shortly after 1 p.m. They enjoyed dinner and conversation for a while before leaving their son with his grandparents as they headed out to enjoy some alone time together. Their plans were not overly extravagant. The weekend would be spent hanging out with one of Tyler's best friends at the Easton Town Center, which is a shopping, dining, and entertainment complex in Columbus. The couple rented a hotel room at the Hilton, checking in around 5 p.m. Their friend arrived shortly thereafter. Together, the trio visited for a while at the hotel until heading over to Easton Town Center around 9 p.m. Once at the complex, they explored for a while before heading into their first bar of the evening, Bar Louie. This bar has since been permanently closed for those familiar with the area. Around 10:15 p.m., the group hopped next door to a bar called Adobe Gillis for a few more drinks. Around midnight, they walked back to the hotel. Their night of birthday celebration was not over, however. They wanted their final stop to be at the Dollhouse of Columbus, so they called an Uber to give them a ride. They arrived at the Dollhouse at 12:45 a.m. on February 24th. They had more drinks and stayed there until after last call, around 2:30 a.m. Another Uber picked them up around 3 and drove them back to the hotel. Brittany stayed awake for the short 18-minute duration of the ride, but the men fell asleep, tired and intoxicated. Once they arrived at the hotel, Brittany awoke the friend and together they roused Tyler. Tyler was exhausted and confused. As he exited the vehicle, Tyler fell. When he got up and noticed that the driver was leaving, Tyler grew increasingly agitated. He believed that they were abandoned at the wrong location. They were unable to convince Tyler that they were indeed at the proper spot. It is important to stress that Brittany has emphasized this moment of Tyler's utter confusion and exhaustion as pivotal. When neither Brittany nor their friend could convince Tyler that they were at the Hilton, Tyler stormed off in anger. Brittany attempted to follow him, but their friend insisted that she return to the hotel for a while. He assured her that he had seen Tyler upset like this before and said that he would follow Tyler and help him calm down. Brittany's phone battery was nearly depleted, and she needed to head up to the restroom. With the assurance of their friend, Brittany went back to the room for a few minutes. When she returned outside, she was unable to find neither Tyler nor their friend. At 3:37 a.m., Tyler called Brittany's phone and apologized for his behavior. He said that he needed to walk for a few more minutes but would return soon. Their friend returned shortly thereafter without Tyler by his side. He insisted that Tyler would be back shortly. Tyler seemed adamant that he just needed a few minutes alone to cool down. This was not uncharacteristic behavior for him when he had been drinking and was so tired, the friend reiterated. He wasn't worried and felt Brittany should try not to worry as well. Brittany, however, was uneasy with the entire situation. She had only a brief moment of reprieve when Tyler called her again at 4:10 a.m. He informed her that he wasn't far away. He said he was in a wooded area but could see the hotel in the distance. His best guess was that he would be back at the hotel within a few minutes. They exchanged I love yous and hung up. For an instant, it seemed that all would be well. Unfortunately, that was the final time that Brittany heard her husband's voice. As soon as their call ended, Brittany's phone rang again. It was Tyler calling her again, but this time the connection only lasted about 4 seconds. All Brittany heard was silence before the line disconnected. She immediately called him back, but his phone went straight to voicemail. That has not changed since that morning. Brittany waited for Tyler outside the hotel until her phone needed to be charged again. He didn't return as he'd promised. After recharging her phone a second time, Brittany called a friend of hers while she continued to search the immediate area for Tyler. After a short while, Brittany called his friends who lived nearby for any possible assistance. Within a few hours, Brittany had contacted Tyler's parents and the Columbus Police Department. The police department informed her that little could be done by them officially until he was missing between 48 and 72 hours. The eastern area is canvassed by over 600 cameras, but the last time that Tyler was seen on camera was outside of the Hilton as they exited the Uber that morning. Many friends, family members, and volunteers have worked tirelessly to find any possible evidence regarding Tyler's disappearance. Multiple searches have been conducted, from sonar and helicopters to dive teams and canvassing locations on foot. Tyler has yet to be found. Questions have yet to be answered. Tyler disappeared in the early morning hours of February 24, 2019. He was last seen walking on foot. He was wearing dark blue jeans and a white t-shirt. He had a bluish-green flannel shirt and white and black Nikes. Tyler is described as 5 feet 10 inches tall and 170 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes, and his most distinguishing feature is the visible red birthmark that extends from his right hand all the way up his arm to his neck. Brittany deserves answers about the whereabouts of her husband. His parents want their son to return, and Tyler's son wants to see his father again. His family wants him home. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Tyler J. Davis, please contact the Columbus Police Department at 614-645-2358. There's also an active Facebook group, which we'll link in the description. Hello, friends. Welcome to the latest installment of our Land of the Lost series. This time, we're delving into the cases of Keisland Roberts and Caleb Smith. Now, with all the bizarre and seemingly unexplainable disappearance stories going around on YouTube and other places these days, it's easy to get caught up in them and forget that these are real people, real possible victims who had family and friends, loved ones whose lives were affected in every possible way by the person's disappearance. It could also be true that with all the books coming out and, again, all the videos made and the information online about these cases, it's quite easy to become numbed or jaded to these stories, to these people. Couldn't it also be true that maybe this numbness, this nonchalance, and somewhat boredom with cases like these, one after another, could be exactly what, who, or whatever is involved in orchestrating these disappearances and murders counts on? In this episode, we're going to discuss 2 different cases that have a strange similarity and also a bit of a connection. Please keep in mind, though, that these are real human beings, and though their cases may or may not be similar to those you've heard over 1,000 times already, be sure and pay attention to the details here. Listen closely and focus on the similarities and strangeness of both of these cases, while being sure to bear in mind that there is one big difference. One of them could very well still be alive, and one of them, unfortunately, has already been found deceased. Let's start with the tragedy of Caleb Smith. On January 15, 2020, Caleb Smith told his grandmother that he was driving to Rome, Georgia, to spend the day hanging out with some friends who lived there. This wasn't anything out of the ordinary for the 21-year-old, so when he requested that she leave the deadbolt to the front door of their house unlocked for him so he could re-enter when he got back home later on that night, she happily obliged and thought nothing of it. Little did she know that while she would speak to her grandson at least one more time over the phone that same day, as he walked out the front door of their house that ill-fated cold day in January, it would be the last time she would ever actually see him alive. Technically, the next day, at 12:32 a.m., Caleb entered the Flying J gas station in Resaca, Georgia. This was on the way to Rome, Georgia. We know Caleb entered this establishment at this exact time because he was seen on the gas station's minimal surveillance footage. 3 minutes later, at 12:35 a.m., Caleb called his grandmother and informed her that he had to pull into the rest stop because he realized he didn't have enough gas to get to Rome as he'd initially planned. He told her there was one man sitting at a table on the other side of the restaurant that he was going to ask to help him with $5 for gas money so he can continue on his journey to go and see his friends. Though his phone records have not been made public at this time, Caleb is seen on the same surveillance footage sitting at his table for a few minutes, seemingly sending texts but possibly browsing the internet. Caleb did eventually get up and approach the man, Assumingly, he asked the man for the $5 for gas monies he'd told his grandmother he was going to do. However, it is unclear whether or not the man gave Caleb the $5, and Caleb actually ended up approaching the man twice in a matter of just a few minutes. It's still unknown exactly what the exchanges were between the two men. No word either on whether or not this man was ever identified or questioned. No information, one way or the other, can be found. After approaching and speaking to this man the second time, Caleb returns to his own table and sits down, facing this unknown man. After just a minute or two, Caleb gets up and leaves the gas station rest stop area, never to be seen alive again. When morning came and Caleb's grandmother realized that his bed hadn't been slept in, she became very concerned. If Caleb had planned on staying out, he never would have asked her to leave the deadbolt unlocked for him. She decided to go to the last place she knew him to be when he wasn't answering his phone or returning any of her texts, so she got into her own car and drove down to the Flying J rest stop and searched the surrounding area and the parking lot for Caleb's car. She eventually found his car parked in the Flying J parking lot, but in the back of the Denny's restaurant building, assuming where the back entrance or garbage exit would be. This location could be important because it seems Caleb was parked almost purposely out of view of any of the surveillance cameras. His grandmother states that she didn't immediately get out of her car to search Caleb's car because she saw a suspicious-looking white Nissan that, in her words, she said, freaked her out, and decided it was safer to remain in her vehicle until Caleb's other family members, whom she had just called, arrived. She never elaborated on why this white Nissan was suspicious-looking to her or why it freaked her out so, although it's speculated it was because the windows were tinted very dark and the vehicle had pulled in and parked directly facing her in front of her vehicle, and nobody exited the Nissan. Immediately upon the arrival of the other two family members she had called to come and assist her, the white Nissan pulled out of the parking lot. There's no information regarding whether or not this white Nissan had any involvement in what happened to Caleb. Upon searching Caleb's car, the family found it was unlocked. His cell phone and battery were separated and both in the glove box. The keys to the vehicle were on the floor underneath the seat. Although Caleb had called his grandmother the previous night and explained to her that he was almost out of gas, his car had a half a tank of gas in it when it was found. This would have been more than enough to get him to roam. Essentially, Caleb called his grandmother to explain about his being low on gas for seemingly no reason. It's been said that he did it to give a reason as to why he would be later than expected coming home, if he was stuck trying to get money for gas, but that hasn't been verified. Caleb's jacket was also found in the car. It was a very cold night in Georgia in the middle of January. The family couldn't understand why he would leave his jacket behind. After searching his vehicle, his family called the police to report Caleb as missing. Gordon County Sheriff's Office spent all of the next 2 days, January 16th and 17th, searching the areas around the Flying J rest stop for any additional evidence or for Caleb himself, with no results. It's also worth mentioning here that the GCSO never processed Caleb's car for additional evidence, forensic or otherwise, and immediately released it to the family. On February 3rd, 2020, Caleb Smith's body was found 5 miles away from the Flying J. He was in a marshy and overgrown area of the county between the Sugar Valley and Hill City communities. The sheriff's office reported that a passerby found him in a heavily overgrown and poorly drained area. Caleb was completely naked, and oddly enough, the fire department had been dispatched to that same area his body was found earlier in the day in response to a small brush fire and didn't come across Caleb's remains. This is another odd fact. Despite not knowing whether or not this brush fire was connected to Caleb's death or not, it was an incredibly wet few weeks there in Georgia at the time, so for a brush fire to have been started on its own was almost impossible. The initial report stated, however, no immediate indications of violence were apparent regarding Caleb's body, and the GBI revealed that there were no indications of violence or evidence of foul play. The results of the toxicology report were as follows. Caleb died as a result of methamphetamine intoxication. There's no known information as to whether or not Caleb ever had a problem with any kind of drugs, and the death was ruled accidental. If it weren't for something eerily similar happening to a young woman just 2 days later at the same exact Flying J gas station, that may have been the end of Caleb's story. However, when you add up the similarities with the story I'm about to relate to you, Even when sprinkling in the differences, one can't help but wonder. We in the true crime community know there's usually no such thing as coincidence, and we all also know that nobody knows this better than law enforcement. So why exactly are they trying so hard to make us believe that coincidence is exactly what seems to connect these two cases? Are we really to believe that a young man, supposedly with enough methamphetamine in his system to kill him, stripped off his clothes and then not only decided to walk 5 miles in the bitter cold, high and naked, but that he managed to do so without calling any attention to himself at all? Is it reasonable to think that not a single person would have noticed a naked young man walking on the side of the road for an entire 5 miles? There are so many facts that just do not seem to fit with the accidental death ruling. Let's review just some of them now. First of all, even if we asked no questions and accepted that Caleb was able to walk all that way without being noticed despite the condition he was in both physically and mentally, keep in mind Caleb was found completely naked. This means no socks, no shoes, nothing. Are we also to believe that he could have accomplished this naked and 5-mile walk without not only doing no damage to, but also not dirtying his feet at all? There's no explanation as to why or how the police have been able to reconcile themselves to calling this death, with all the strange facts and evidence, an accident. Caleb was found in a very muddy, marshy area. Not even a drop of mud on his feet. His clothes were never found either, but again, there is no information as to the extent of the police investigation into where his clothes went either. Why wasn't Caleb's family allowed to identify the body? Some say it's simply because of the state of decomposition of the body after being outside the marshland for so long, but others aren't so sure. Remember, this was during the cold winter in January. Speculation and rumors surround this case, and it seems no one knows enough to be able to separate fact from fiction. Our research was only able to find 2 that weren't absolutely off-the-wall wild conjectures and made just a tiny bit of sense. The first of these theories is that he may have gotten into someone else's car to smoke the methamphetamine, a dealer, or perhaps maybe the man he was seen on camera having multiple conversations with, who, to the best of the public's knowledge, was never even found, let alone questioned or investigated in any way. And as tends to happen sometimes to people who partake in this particular substance, Caleb became overheated and started taking off his clothes. Before anyone knew what was happening, Caleb started overdosing, and whoever he was with, if he was with anyone, didn't want to be involved in any way with this overdose death for fear, especially if they were the one that sold or gave it to him. But even if they were just using with him and drove Caleb's body to the marshland and left it there, did whoever this person or people were think about DNA evidence or forensics, and possibly, instead of Caleb stripping himself, did the perpetrators or witnesses strip him of his clothes after he died to eliminate any kind of touch or fiber evidence, eventually coming back to link them or their car to his death? The fact of the matter is, we just don't know, and it seems as though if the investigators in this case have it their way, we never will. Caleb's case is officially closed at this point. 2 days after the incident with Caleb at this Flying J gas station, an eerily and almost shockingly similar disappearance happened. Many people who are familiar with Caleb's case feel like what happened to Keeslyn Roberts, or at least what everyone knows happened to her because she is yet to be found, should have initiated at least a little bit more investigation into his case. They believe it should have led the police, as it did for most of the public, into asking some serious questions regarding that accidental death ruling. So, what happened to Keeslyn? Let's find out. Now, please keep in mind as we go over the details that we know in her case that she is still considered missing and should be presumed alive until it can be proven that she is not. So pay close attention. On January 18, 2020, a 21-year-old young woman named Keeslyn Roberts was seen at the same Flying J gas station, only she was encountered entering an employees-only entrance in the back on the Denny's side. Remember, this is also where Caleb's car was found. The same Flying J gas station in Resaca, Georgia. Some reports state that Keeslyn was simply told by an employee that she could not be back there in this employees-only kitchen area entrance, and others state that she actually got into some kind of altercation with the person who informed her of this and was then told to leave. There's nothing official to confirm or disprove either one of these statements. Remember, there are no cameras in this part of the parking lot. What is known, however, is that When she was told or asked to exit the area, she was allegedly just standing there, staring blankly out the door she'd just entered. Kiesland had dropped all of her belongings. These included a backpack containing her ID, credit and debit cards, cash and phone charger, and ran off. The employees of either the gas station side or the Denny's side, again these reports conflict, ended up calling 911 and described Kiesland as a suspicious-looking young woman and described the odd encounter. Kiesland was never seen or heard from again. Where did Kiesland go, and how did she get there without her car? Her vehicle was found 2 days later on January 20th with more belongings inside, parked very near where Caleb's car was found in the exact same parking lot. Witnesses would later come forward stating that they had briefly spoken to Kiesland that fateful night, and she had allegedly told them she was there meeting a male friend. However, this alleged meeting has never been elaborated on. The person she was supposedly meeting and also her boyfriend were questioned by police shortly after she was reported missing, but so far nobody has been named either a suspect or even a person of interest in the case. It's worth mentioning that Kiesland did have a history with drug use, mainly methamphetamine, and had blown off a mandatory probation appointment the day before she went missing, resulting in a warrant being issued for her arrest. Many speculate that Kiesland so quickly fled from the Flying J that day due to not wanting to be there when the police were called, because she would have been arrested on this warrant. But why not take her car? More speculation had Kiesland possibly leaving the gas station with a trucker, but again, this hasn't been confirmed. In early March of 2020, when investigators searched the Flying J, and no idea why it took this long for them to search the area her car was found in and where she was last seen, they did find items of clothing that belonged to Kiesland in a dumpster behind the building. An anonymous witness, who has been said to be fully cooperative with police and not involved in any way to her disappearance, came forward and told reporters that these articles of clothing had been there the entire time, but police were allegedly just getting around to searching for and collecting them as evidence now, and now meaning 2 months later in March. Unfortunately, this is all the evidence available, at least online, in either case. Can it really all be a coincidence that two young people, one a known drug user and the other a possibility, found dead from intoxication from the other's drug of choice, go missing from the exact same gas station under eerily similar circumstances within 2 days of each other? Is it also just happenstance that the two also live on the same street as each other? Now, there's no evidence that they even knew each other, but still, a little too much to overlook if you ask most people involved with or following this case. Where is Kiesland? Did she meet the same fate as Caleb and just hasn't been found yet? Was Caleb's death truly an accident? And even if it was, someone obviously moved his body at least, and at most, they murdered him and dumped it at the location where it was found. Is Kiesland running on her own and of her own free will due to fear, again, of being arrested for that probation violation and probable relapse? It's also worth mentioning here that there have been several sightings of Kiesland at multiple truck stops in various cities across the country. However, none of these have ever been able to actually be confirmed as her. Now, as we mentioned, her clothes were found 2 months after she was last seen fleeing the scene, so where did she go while naked? Also, without anyone seeing her, as the police are insinuating, Caleb took a 5-mile naked walk without being noticed too. Were her clothes really there the entire time, as the anonymous and seemingly cooperative witness claimed to news reporters? Or were they dumped there after the fact, for whatever reason? Currently, there's a $6,000 reward for information that could lead to Kiesland's whereabouts. If you can help this investigation in any way, or think you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please contact the Gordon County Sheriff's Department at 706-629-1244. So, what do you think of this case? Are these bizarre circumstances simply coincidence, or is there indeed a connection here? I look forward to reading your comments. As always, we ask that you please be respectful in the comment section when discussing this case. Many times, family and friends of the victims do watch these videos and read the comments. So please don't say anything that you wouldn't say if it was your family member or friend in this circumstance. In closing, be good to yourselves and each other. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.